Welcome, everybody. My name is Steve Mantis, and I'm your host for this morning. So I'm the chair of the research committee with the Ontario Network of Interworkers Groups, and I'm one of the members of the organizing committee for the Bancroft Institute. Now, the Bancroft Institute is a informal, formal group with no staff and no money and no office or anything, but we come together to try to maintain and build strong partnerships between the community of interworkers and the folks that work in there and the interworkers themselves and our organizations, union activists with academic and university folks. What we've learned along the way is that the partnerships are key to really producing and being able to use research effectively. And there's all kinds of barriers all the time to kind of ongoing long-term partnerships that have been identified ever since we started working with academics. So Bancroft kind of pops up whenever there's a gap and says, let's fill it, let's work together. We host usually 3 events similar to this every year. Our session today is about a number of things. On the one hand, it's about the poverty of interworkers and trying to understand and expose and figure out how can we use the research that we've already done, that we've worked together in partnership on, to try to make a difference and improve the lives of all workers, and particularly those who are injured and have a serious injury and a permanent disability. That's the group that we really serve primarily as the Ontario Network of Interworkers Groups. But it's also a moment of kind of reflection and evaluation. So we've been working together for 10, 15 years, more for some of us. And every so often it's important to stop and say, how are we doing? Actually, in our national interworkers organization, the Canadian Interworkers Alliance, lucky to be able to be exposed to a little bit of the political philosophy and theory in Quebec. You know, we have 2 founding nations, French and English, and they both have quite different systems. And if you remember, the French, they had a revolution and they formed a republic. And the philosophy in the republic was, it's all about citizens, that we're all citizens, and that we all have a responsibility as citizens to participate in the republic, in making the kind of society we want to have. And my friend Leanne Flibeau explained that it's a circle of what our responsibility is. Our responsibility is to look at our society, at our community, and say, geez, we need to work on this and improve. And you take action. And you start working away at that. And then after the action, you stop and you look at it and reflect and say, how do we do? Do we meet our goals? How are we along the way? Reformulate your plans and take action again. And me, I'm like, let's take action all the time. I'm kind of known for like heading off in every direction, and you kind of go, where is he anymore? I can't find him. So I've had to learn, and over the last couple of years, I've been kind of going, hey, this reflection, this evaluation is increasingly important. So we're using really our experience looking at the poverty of interworkers and years of work that has been done already collectively on that. How are we doing? So it's an example that can inform work we are doing going forward. How do we work effectively to really make the world a better place? And that's our challenge today. But we also are looking at a concrete set of research that we're going to see there's a number of factors that influence how this all works. And so today, I hope most everybody has an agenda. We're spending the morning looking at 3 different research studies, all looking at that issue of poverty, done in different ways, by different groups of people, using different methodology, and also thinking about, as that was happening, sometimes more, sometimes less, what do we do with the research once it's done? How are we going to use what we're learning to improve our lives, our communities? So that, we'll have our 3 presenters, and then we'll have time for kind of discussion around that. After lunch, then we're going to get into a little bit more interaction in small groups. We'll have a little theater piece right after lunch. Then we'll spend a fair amount of time in small groups thinking about, okay, how can we use what we have learned already that the research has shown to us and what we know from our experiences, what can we do next to try to make our community a better place? And we started off last night bringing in other researchers, experienced researchers working in that general area of workers' health, looking at it from different angles to kind of share some of their experiences. And as Marion and Constance and I afterwards, spent hours kind of debriefing and thinking about and hearing all the exciting things that we heard about. And some of them were around partnerships and how partnerships work. And the one thing that I learned, which right away I'm starting to go, okay, who do I know within the movement? So UQAM, the University of Montreal at Quebec, University of Quebec at Montreal, sorry about that, has a unique program that is an ongoing partnership that is funded and structurally built into the academic world, into the university world, where professors, where academic researchers can engage with the community and still get credit for that. What we heard when we started our Kira 10 years ago is for young researchers to really engage with us in the community, they were risking potential career advancements because that work wasn't recognized in some of the standard university environments. So here we're kind of asking these younger researchers to help us, and they have to actually say, gosh, am I going to give up some of my opportunities maybe to make tenure? Because it takes twice as long or 3 times as long to work with you guys than it does for me just to do my own research and write my articles and start assembling my CV. So it's a hard thing. So moving to where we can actually have structural support for this kind of stuff at the university level is really important in how to do it. And what we learned from Karen was it was done through collective bargaining. That it was the union representing the instructors, the professors, built it into the negotiation so that there is a formal partnership with 3 major unions in Quebec and with the university. And there's money, as well as the recognition of what the professors are contributing to this partnership. We heard, interesting too, from Wayne Luchuk from McMaster University. And he's also getting up there, similar to my age, and years of experience. So he was kind of reflective. It was nice. Afterwards we talked. He says, I really liked it. You kind of pushed me. You made me think about some of this stuff more. And so Wayne has most recently published in partnership with a number of community partners around precarious employment. And the partners included the United Way of Toronto. And when you, there's a few copies of the report back there. You know, it looks like this. You look at the report, you kind of go, wow, this is really cool. It's really easy to understand. You know, I can go through this in a fair amount of time. It's really easy to read. It's full of charts, it's full of colors. And it's really clear that if you're in precarious employment, your health is worse, your opportunity for advancement is worse, the amount of time you can spend with your family and help your children grow and mature is at risk. There's all kinds of things, and quickly you can see this. And what he talked about was, he says, you know, I used to, in my early days, I followed the normal pattern, and I would write these articles that almost no one could understand, that get published in a peer-reviewed journal that it's hard to know who even reads. He said, we worked on this together, and there's been 50,000 downloads already from the United Way website. And we've taken our own money and put it into publishing this piece. You know, it's so different than the normal academic pattern. And it was also interesting to hear, because I put Becky on the spot, you know, we heard from the senior researchers who have lived that life in academia, that this is what you have to do. You have to do the peer review that who knows who sees and what really happens. And we know there's a change in society. There is more and more interest in partnerships between universities and community. The funding organizations are starting to recognize that. I'm on 2 or 3 different listservs where I'm, you know, every day I'm getting emails where people are trying to figure this out. How does it work? What do you do? How do you make it happen? And I was so pleased. I put Becky on the spot, who's a, you know, a recent PhD who's worked with us for 10 years or something. And it was so encouraging to hear that she said, you know, I got my postdoc position because I have experience working with the community. So there is these more opportunities that are beginning to open up for young researchers to be rewarded in a way, rather than risking themselves, to be rewarded for participating together. So there was so much already last night, you know, for me to kind of think about and synthesize. And we'll have lots more opportunity today to now kind of go, okay, what did we learn in our research pieces? What have we been able to do so far in using it? And one of the reasons why we're looking at that is because we're upset. I don't know if we're all upset. I'm upset. You know, here we are, we've been working for 15 years with academics to expose what happens to injured workers. We published some of this research, and then the institution, the WSIB, who we think is supposed to be there to help, kind of takes some of this research and twists it around and says, you know, everything's really good. There's nothing wrong. We are doing so good. The research doesn't say that exactly, but you can take things and you can manipulate them and broadcast them out there to, well, we all spin. We all try to use the information we have to make ourselves look good. It's natural. But when our public institution, who we think is supposed to be part of us, does that, and it's almost like it's lying, we get upset. So what do we do about that? How can we, through our partnership, through how we do research, how we interpret and analyze the research? That was another thing Wayne talked about, where after they've collected all their data on this big survey they did, 4,000 something people, then, you know, they're sitting in a room around the table with all these diverse perspectives. As you say, sometimes it got a little exciting. I mean, to me, it means loud, you know, in terms of people expressing their opinions, but they worked through it and found a way to say, okay, yeah, we're all good with this one. We're good with how we're going to talk about this and put it forward. And just that alone means you now have 10 people who have bought in rather than 1 or 2. And 10 people that, in their case, some of them are communications professionals who are now going to communicate it, to send it out there so that it's not just in this little world that is hard to access if you don't have kind of connections to university to be able to get some of these research articles. So a lot of excitement for me. I mean, this is an area that I've been really keen on, for the last 15, 20 years. And it's really in my work as an advocate to, try to push the government and the Workers' Compensation Board to improve along the way. They've said, you tell us these nice stories, but give us hard facts. Give us the researchers. So we're out there working with researchers, and it's still new to us. We've learned a lot. We've done a lot of good things, but we have more to learn. And so today is one of those opportunities to learn, to exchange ideas, to challenge each other sometimes about how we do it. There's not a right or wrong here. It's really a learning experience for all of us. And that's one of the things I find most fun as I get older is learning new things. So with that, I want to invite Marion up to give us a little tribute to one of my mentors, for sure. I first met Terry Ison in 1990, I think. And it was in Sudbury, and we had our Interworkers Conference. It was really one of the founding conferences, in a way, for Onaway. And he came and made a presentation. When he showed up in his bedroom slippers to make his presentation, I went, "That's my guy." He wasn't worried about trying to impress you with how he looked, because what he had to say is what really carried all the weight. Marion.
Thank you. It was about 102 years ago now that Justice Sir William Meredith concluded his thoughtful and rather lengthy report that laid out the foundations of our workers' compensation system here in Ontario and that ultimately laid the basis for around our whole country. And his plan sought to provide for a non-adversarial, straightforward system that provided financial security to both employers and to workers if they were injured. To employers through the protection from lawsuits, and through workers through the provisions of benefits quickly and for as long as the disability lasted. And Meredith knew that the system would be buffeted by forces seeking to shift the balance. And he trusted, he hoped that future minds would understand what he was getting at, and that they would seek to protect and to sustain and to develop the system along the fundamental foundations that he had laid down. So last month, sadly and really quite unexpectedly, we lost one of those future minds. Professor Terry Ison passed away in September, and his home in Salt Spring Island. And he was one of the best. He was one of the best of those future minds. Pretty well all of us in this room have been engaged in making the system better, in understanding the system, in trying to make it work better, actively involved in the development of law, of policy, and in research. But it was Terry who really had the deep, overarching understanding about the systems and he dedicated himself to writing about it, to teaching it, and to practicing it. And I think one of the things that stands out for me about Terry is his somewhat rare combination of both academic training and hands-on administrative and adjudicative practice. And it's that combination that makes his work so rich for us, so useful for us, so clearly something that we need to pay attention to now and ongoing as we seek to have the system achieve its historic mission. And I reflect that that's also part of the purpose of the Bancroft Institute, and that is to also, in a different kind of way, bring together these different worlds of seeking to understand things and experiencing those things in life. And hopefully it's that by bringing together those worlds that our Bancroft work, the people associated with Bancroft, will produce ever richer research results and the use of that research. Terry thought about, many, many things, wrote about many, many things, and always had very interesting ways of putting things too. So, one of his papers is The Statistical Significance and Distraction of Scientific Proof, quote unquote, scientific proof. And, last night, when our guests were speaking, and particularly Karen, all about the alpha and the beta and all this kind of thing. And I was thinking about Terry's paper because he wrote about that kind of thing too. But it was his thinking about compensation, I think sort of two areas I just want to comment on. Possibly because they've been so important, they continue to be so important. It was his thinking about compensation for permanent partial disability. In the 1980s in Ontario, he was invited to partake in discussion about what should be done there. And he was invited to analyze Paul Weiler's work. And of course, Paul Weiler had written a very, very thoughtful report, but it contained some basic concepts that really worried Professor Ison. And it was Ison's critique of the actual wage law system and of deeming, along with the vigorous efforts of the injured worker and labor movements, that produced changes that helped protect workers against the harshest real-world aspects of what was being proposed. Terry rang the alarm bell based on his own experience in working in other systems and studying those systems. For example, he pointed out that the actual wage loss method required constant monitoring and assessment of the injured worker's situation, which he famously said would be almost like a sentence of perpetual probation. And people thought about that. Yeah, that's true. And as a result of that, the legislation was put in a final review. And at that point, the worker would know what they had and be able to proceed with their life accordingly. And likewise, he pointed out that deeming would significantly degrade true rehabilitation. Their workers would become afraid to try jobs, and the programs would be more about benefit control than actual employment value. The legislature, therefore, put in a staged review system. We've lost that in the meantime, but anyway, put in a staged review system that gave clear periods of economic security, which provided the base for courage and for support and for the natural enthusiasm of injured workers to re-enter the workforce. It was just a couple of years ago that Terry came and he came a number of times and spoke to conferences here. And I would say in just about every conference that he came to in the last few years, and he would make a grand speech really touching on so many different things. But in that myriad of issues that he would address, his ultimate message was that you can't fix everything at once. And where you have to start is at the most important thing, and that was, he said, to abolish experience rating. When experience rating was first put forward as a health and safety initiative by Paul Weiler, Professor Ison was at that time swift to identify it as a highly problematic concept that would complicate our system and make it adversarial with all the problems that we have come to see. Like his insight into deeming, like his insight into the need for certainty, he was on this topic so correct way back there in the early 1980s. Excuse me. And I often think, if only we had heeded him then. So, there's just so much I'd like to say about Terry, but just in summary, he has given us a wealth of insights, and not just kind of musing things of theoretical, but in addition to his analysis that is so helpful, he has given us what to do. He has given us answers. He's given us the concepts of how to make the system really work the way it's intended, as a simple, non-adversarial system to provide compensation when it's needed. So I'd like us to take just a moment now, a moment of silence, and to think of him each in our own way. But I do have to say that for me, not only was he a mentor, somebody whose work I turned to, but he was also a dear friend.